to, and I'm happy to have listened to the presentation that has been made by Carol. And I will just say a few things. Just listening to Carol, it took me back to when I was appointed Minister for Agriculture. When I went to the Ministry of Agriculture in 2008, I found that the things that need to be done are already in government books, and we didn't need anything new to be able to get the ministry running. We just needed to roll up our sleeves and provide leadership, and things would change. And many people told me then I had a man called Romano Kiome, who many people thought he was a very difficult person. And many people asked me, how are you going to work with this guy? But I found Romano a very good Kenyan, because he was determined on delivery. And many people did not like being pushed to deliver. Listening to Caro and the team this morning, I am also clear that what needs to be done in Kenya, you don't need to invest in any research. It's already in our books. Many of the things that need to be done are already known, and all that is required now is the necessary leadership to deliver on the things that we already know should be done. And that is what this election is going to be about. My own perspective on the presentation that has been made and the place where we are as a country. I remember saying 3 years ago that we are going to change the conversation in Kenya. That's not going to be about leaders. It's not about changing the constitution. It's not going to be about sharing power. But it's going to be about the people. It's not going to be about changing the constitution. It's going to be about changing the economy. It's not going to be about sharing power. It's going to be about how to empower the citizens of our country. And that's where we are today. We have pushed the conversation in the political space to the place where we are today. We are discussing the economy. From the Kenya Kwanza bottom-up economic model to all the array up to where our other friends are. And I'm a very proud Kenyan that we are having a conversation in this election about the economy. It couldn't have been any better. I know there is an attempt to still continue to bring back the discussion about changing the constitution, creating a few more positions, creating a position of ombudsman to supervise the judiciary, giving additional power to the president to be able to manage the judiciary and to manage the legislature. But I'm very confident that the people of Kenya will make the correct decision, and that what we need to change in this election is not the constitution, but the economy. And why the economy from where I sit? The way to move Kenya to the next level, as has been ably articulated by Carol, is how to relook at the whole spectrum of our economy. From the Kenya Kwanza perspective, we believe that the first step towards everything you have said here is how to capitalize the private sector. That's the whole essence. If you ask me what bottom-up is, it's about how to capitalize the private sector. I know when we say capitalize the private sector, many people wonder whether we are talking about capitalizing the corporates. That's not what we are discussing. We are discussing about having a limited resource base. How do you deploy the resources we have where we can get the highest return? Highest return in terms of creating jobs, highest return in terms of creating opportunity, highest return in terms of creating wealth, and highest return in terms of how we can move everybody to the next level. From the Kenya Kwanza perspective, we believe that the limited resources we have, the way to get the highest return is to deploy in areas that not only give us quick returns, but also the highest returns. And where are these areas? You've heard us say the lowest hanging fruit is in the agricultural space and in the micro and small enterprise space. If we deploy resources, public resources that is, in that sector of the private sector, we will then not only their productivity and get a quicker return, but we will then create a market. So it's about increasing our productivity and expanding the market for everybody. Let me maybe put it much more clearly. We believe that agriculture being the low-hanging fruit, deploying public resources in increasing the productivity of our farmers is the easiest place to begin. Why? Because number one, whether it is crops, we have the farmers already in place. They are already doing it. If it is maize, they are producing 5 bags per acre. We can make them produce 15 in one season. If we make sure they have the correct seed, and we make sure they have access to affordable fertilizer, we will increase their productivity. Milk, for example. We are the largest producer of milk in this continent. We produce 5 billion liters of milk every year. But on average, per cow, we produce between 3 and 4 kilos per cow. With quality seed, with quality feed, we can increase the productivity of every cow from 3 to 15 or 20. That way, we can take it, even if we double it to 10 billion liters. Milk can easily overtake horticulture can easily overtake tea in terms of our foreign exchange earner. And we have the market for it in this continent. This continent imports milk from New Zealand and all manner of places. I slipped a bit the other day. I was having a session in Nyeri, and I was trying to talk about DRC, where we have 90 million people. But I was misquoted. I was trying to say, DRC, we enjoy their music. They can also enjoy our milk, you know, because they are a big market, and they are actually a potential market. Why do I say it's a hanging fruit? We have the cows. The farmers are already doing it, only that they are producing 3 kilos. From the same cow, they can produce 10, 15 kilos, and we can double or even triple our milk production. So this is the sector that has the lowest hanging fruit. Why do I say that? We can increase the productivity of our crop farmers in one season. We can increase the productivity of our cows within 2-3 months. So that's the place, in our opinion, where if you invest, if you deploy, the problem with that space is capital. They don't have the money to do it. And we need to deploy capital and support that sector. What does it do? We have close to 6 million. Anyway, 60% of Kenyans do some sort of farming. Even the people in this room. Everybody here is some sort of a farmer. Yeah, I'm sure Mureu does something, and all the other people. So that's where the bigger portion of our population is, and we can, if we enhance the productivity of that sector, we will also expand the market for everybody. And that's why we believe that sector is the easiest sector to begin to stimulate our economy. We have done very well with the deployment of infrastructure. Our second term was about the Big Four, many of you know. And one of the pillars of the Big Four was agriculture. And what we wanted to achieve in agriculture is to increase the productivity of our agricultural sector. Unfortunately, we haven't quite done what we wanted to do. And I know everybody here knows why. We got a bit busy with the BBI project and took a bit of our time. And unfortunately, it ended at a place called null and void. That is the sector that can give us quick returns. Number two, we also believe that the small and micro space, as Carol has said here, is another place where we have opportunity. If we capitalize the micro, because what's the situation? 800 young people join the job market, or the labor market every year. Corporates hire 50,000. Medium corporates and enterprises hire another 150, maybe 200,000. So we have a whole 600,000 people every year joining the labor market. But because there is no space, they go to this micro and small enterprise space where they their income is $1, maybe $2, maybe $3 on a good day. And that whole sector has a big challenge in the space of capital. I've had occasion to interact with many people in that space. I remember, for example, I went to Ruaka, and a lady there called Shiko talked to me and said, you see, Mr. Hustler, what we do here, we borrow 1 million shillings every day in this market. 10. Why? That's the credit we can access. Of course, all of you are aware that we have 15 million here. That announcement was made by His Excellency the President in Parliament a few months ago. Reason? Access to credit by the micro, small enterprise people. Because Fuliza charges them 6% per day. So if we capitalize that micro, small space, instead of them paying 1,000, 3,600% per year, if they paid 10% like the people sitting in this room, or 15% with the people sitting in this room, and we did what Caro said here, we provided them good space for them to do their enterprise, build good markets, make sure that they have a decent space to operate from, make sure that there is law that protects their business. They are not running from Kanjo and the rest of the guys. Those people can move from $2, $3 to $6, $7 per day. That is a space where we have opportunity. What does that do? Putting a little money in those two areas, because we have limited resources. You know, we have limited resources. And if you have limited resources, you deploy them in the place where you have the quickest and possibly the highest return. We've discussed the Biashara Bank forever. Yeah, that's why I have said when or if elected, we will put the first 50 billion shillings in the fund for micro and small enterprise for them to have access to credit. And we will continue until we saturate the absorption in that space. Just by access to credit, they can increase their incomes by at least $2 every day, because access to credit consumes that much from the people in that sector. So the bottom-up economic model is basically about access to capital in the private sector, expanding the market, and making sure that if all the farmers increase their productivity, they will be a market for the people in the corporate world. If we make sure that the 80%, Caro said, of the people in the micro and small micro and small enterprise, if we increase their productivity and increase their income, they will also become a market for the people in the manufacturing sitting in this room, the people in all the other spaces sitting in this room, and that increased productivity creates opportunities for the people sitting in this room for agro-processing, value addition, and the whole chain going up. That also gives us an opportunity to expand the tax base so that we can create a bigger pool of people who have resources and who can pay tax. And we don't have to rely on a few people today who we are running after and sometimes harassing them. Once we expand at the bottom, more people who are able to pay tax because we have enhanced their productivity in the agricultural sector. We have built an opportunity for agro-processing and value addition and build the value chains. And on the other hand, we have the 10 million people who are in the micro and medium enterprise space. If those 10 million people, we increase their income from the $2 to $6 or $7, in 7 years, we will double the size of our economy from where I sit. Yeah? And these are not difficult decisions because I have served in government and I know how decisions can actually change our whole country. I say so because when we came into office in 2013, we made very simple decisions. For example, what you guys are talking about, the infrastructure in the country. How did we build more roads with the same amount of money? We changed the building code. Today, we have 3 different categories of roads. We have the trunk roads, they are built to a different standard. We have the state construction roads, they are built to a different standard. We have the low volume roads that we are built to a different standard. We just needed to change the road building regulations. And where we were building a kilometer at 80 million, when it went to low volume, we are building it at 20 million. So for 1 kilometer, we could be able to build 4 kilometers with the same resources. So I'm just telling you that to give you the possibilities if we made the right decision. And the reason why we have doubled the number of paved road from 11,000 kilometers in 2013 to 22,000 kilometers in 2022 is because of that simple decision of changing the building code. Let me give you another example. How did we build or how did we connect more people to electricity? In 2013, when we came into office, we had 2.3 million people connected to electricity. Today, we have 8.7 million people connected to electricity. How? We again changed the connection model. You require to pay 70,000 before you are connected in 2013. Today, we connect everybody for free, and we have built in a small percentage into your monthly bill to cover the cost of the 70,000 over a period of 7 years. So that's how we have managed to expand. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say What is required in Kenya is the person to make the simple decisions to move our country to the next level. And that is what we will provide in Kenya Kwanza. We have the experience for it, and we have the capacity to make those decisions. I wish we had not started the BBI story. If we had implemented the Big Four plan, good people sitting in this room, we would be very far as a country. You have discussed the matter of health, for example. If we had passed the law in 2017 after the election on universal health coverage, today every Kenyan would be covered, would have a health insurance scheme. We just passed the law this year after the BBI collapse. That's when we found time to pass the law that we would have passed in 2018. We believe that with a bottom-up approach, we should be able to deploy our capital effectively, public resources we have. We should be able to make sure that we create jobs using the deployment of that capital in the agricultural sector, in the SME sector. And we should be able to expand the market for everybody. And the fourth item, we should be able to ease the chasing of taxes from a few people by making sure that we have a bigger base, we have more taxpayers, and therefore increase the efficiency of tax collection through digitization. Today, we don't collect almost 40% of VAT. We don't collect 40%. We can collect another 250 billion shillings every year just by digitizing the collection of taxes. I am very confident that that is the space we will be able to cover. There is absolutely no reason why we are collecting 14% of our GDP. We can easily move it to 22 or 23% of our GDP, and we should be collecting between 2.5 and 2.8 trillion shillings instead of the 1.6, 1.7 we are collecting at the moment. That way, in my opinion, we can reduce the appetite on borrowing. We can reduce the appetite on borrowing, and we can begin the journey to build and run our affairs more on our taxes and less on borrowing. But it starts with the bottom. Let me say two things so that I can conclude my remarks. We have mentioned here about creating jobs using increasing productivity in our agricultural sector, building on agro-processing, building on value addition to create jobs, and that chain. Increasing access to credit and incomes in our SME sector, create more entrepreneurs, create more jobs. We also must deploy our resources in the infrastructure space to produce more jobs. When we sat down with experts they told us the easiest place to create more jobs is in the housing space. And that's why one of our pillars of the Big Four was housing. The housing pillar was not about houses. It was about jobs. Houses were a byproduct. The real space we were looking for there is jobs. All we needed to do is to provide an off-take mechanism under the housing, by creating a housing fund. It is still pending. The housing fund challenge is still pending. It's a very small, there's a very small thing we need to do in that space. And we will unlock resources, because the commitments that came to our Department of Housing was between 3.5 and 4 trillion commitments, Kenya shillings, people who are ready to invest close to 4 trillion in the housing space. But they needed assurance that when they complete the building of this house, they needed assurance that there will be somebody to buy, and that person has the capacity to repay, and therefore there was need for us to provide an off-take plan by creating a housing fund. Imagine we were unable to create a housing fund that would provide the mechanism for us to stimulate the housing program, so that we can actually unleash what we were actually looking for, the jobs. So I promise that within the deliverables on my 100 days is to make sure that we have a housing fund and an off-take mechanism that will unlock the 4 trillion of investment and create the jobs from the affordable housing program. We have managed, we have tried, we have managed out of the 500,000 houses we were supposed to do, we have tried, I think we've managed about 2,000. You know, as a percentage of what we were supposed to do, I don't want to say we failed. I mean, it's up to you to judge whether we failed or we succeeded. And it's a very simple thing. That's why I'm telling you, we need the leadership with a focus to make the small decisions that will change Kenya. We've always talked about this tremendous potential. But as Vimal said here, we can be at the potential for 50 years unless we make the right decisions. And the right decisions are not necessarily very complicated. In fact, whenever I talk to people and I ask them how we manage to do the roads and how we manage to do the electricity, they tell me, if these decisions are this simple, why haven't they been made? But that's how it is. So, finally, we have to think about the whole space around savings. Today, as a country, our savings is about 7, maybe 7.5, maybe 8 at most % of our GDP. The reason why we borrow from China is because their savings is 55% of their GDP. We have to rethink and rework the whole space of building a savings culture in our country. I mean, many of the people, all the people that have a pay slip know that there is a 200 shillings on their pay slip to NSSF. I'm not saying I'm saying 200 Kenya shillings. It's not $200. 200 Kenya shillings. I mean, anybody in their rightful mind, how can anybody say 200 shillings is a saving? It's very foolish, if I may say. So we have to rethink about how to build our savings so that we can run our development, we can do our investments on the basis of the savings that we have. We have to rethink the whole NSSF concept. I remember I sent our Minister for Labor to Uganda to look at their social security. Uganda, you pay 10% of your salary, and 5%, your employer pays 5%. So your first charge on your salary is your saving. That's why Uganda has built the largest social security in Eastern Central Africa. Tanzania has done the same. The whole parliament in Dodoma was built using their money from social security. And they not only use that money to fund their own development, they also benefit their own people. The interest we are paying for loans to other countries because we have borrowed their savings, we can pay that interest to our own Kenyans if we borrowed from their savings as a government. And we can create a bigger pool of resources that we can borrow at reasonable rates to drive our development. Again, we need to make the decisions that will put that in place, and I commit with my team that those are the decisions we will make. Finally, we must deal firmly and decisively with corruption, conflict of interest, and state capture. We must deal firmly. We must be clear that the fight against theft of public resources cannot be a subjective fight, because then we lose it. It must be a fight that is based on the rule of law. You've said here that our judiciary get I saw your number, 0.6% of the budget. The standard worldwide is 2.25 of our budget. That's why disputes in the business space take forever. That's why corruption cases take forever. And therefore, justice delayed become justice denied. We must operationalize the judiciary fund. And I will operationalize the judiciary fund day one. That is the first signature that I will put. So that we can free the judiciary to discharge its mandate. So that the judiciary can deal with disputes. So that the judiciary can deal firmly, decisively with corruption cases. I do not understand how anybody in their right senses, instead of operationalizing the judiciary fund and getting the judiciary to discharge its mandate independently, anybody could be imagining that you need an ombudsman appointed by the executive to supervise the judiciary so that the judiciary become subjective to the executive. It is madness. Anybody saying that we need to change the law so that the judiciary can now operate not independently, but supervised by the executive, is taking us, I don't know in which direction. Number two, the entire criminal justice system, because the office of the IG is an independent office in the Constitution, independence must include financial independence. If you do not have financial independence, your independence is meaningless. If you still have to depend on money from the office of the president to run an independent office of the IG and the DCI and the rest of it, we are told he who pays the piper calls the tune. That's why we have all these cases. There is a legitimate concern that the office of the DCI has been weaponized, not to discharge the mandate it has in the Constitution, but is being used as a weapon to fight the people you don't like. So, day one, I will sign the instrument to appoint an accounting officer in the office of the IG, so that their budget is no longer in the office of the president, their budget goes to the office of the IG, and they have financial independence, and they can go after whatever crook they want, they can go after whatever criminal they have without seeking permission from any person who is paying their bills. So, simple decisions that need to be made to get this country moving. And I am very, very, very clear in my mind that we can transform this country in a very short while, in a very short time. And we can stop being the potential and be the reality that we should be. When I talk about that whole farming space, this man, Malsha, has been talking to us about contract farming for edible oil crops. And that goes into the space I was talking about, getting the product, putting money in that space around farmers. Why? Because today we import 170 billion of food items into this country. 170 billion. I think edible oils alone is somewhere between 60 and 70 billion. Yet, we can grow it in Kenya. So, we already have a market for what we are increasing the productivity of our farmers. We already have a market for what they will produce. So, I think I have said enough. And I want to ask this room that the very beautiful things that you have laid out here, from our perspective, we believe that we do not have the resources to do everything, but we have the resources to jumpstart and to create the first step and the momentum to be able to do the rest of the things. And we are looking forward to your partnership. I am looking forward to working with you so that we can make these decisions together, and we can all expand our tax base. We do not have to weaponize the KRA to go after people we don't like. We can get the KRA to professionally collect taxes so that we can fund our development and fund our progress, and make sure that we have a nation that leaves nobody behind, and we have prosperity that is shared by the 50 million people in our country. I thank you.
Wow. It has been an interesting session, having the two input from our leaders, from the private sector and from the presidential candidate. And what really comes out is that the work of today is the history of tomorrow, and we are its makers. Let us all strive to be mad, as Vimal always tells us, and that means let us go out and make a difference and be partners in growing the economy. To that, I'll request we make 4 atamas to appreciate the speakers, and then I'll request after that to have in your Bath, who's the chair of KEPSA Foundation, to take us to the plenary. But Adipi, there will be some questions that we'll request for your participation and the entire team, and then we will then have the closing remarks. So we'll request for your patience as we're almost done. Let us do the 4 atamas. We go atama, 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 atama. It's in your Bath. Karibu sana.